Funding for Off 90 is provided in part by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.
Cruising your way on this episode of Off 90. We watch a poetry slam in Rochester. We visit a company in Faribault that's been in business since the Civil War. We learn about how Minnesota got its distinctive shape. And we meet a Renaissance artist in Owatonna. It's all just ahead, Off 90. Hi, I'm Barbara Keith. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Off 90. For the last 3 years, STEM Academy English teacher Jonathan Edwards and Twin Cities poet Frank Centwali have run a spoken word poetry program at the school. The Youth Slam, an event held at the Rochester Civic Theater, was a rallying event for STEM students as well as students from other organizations to get together and share their gift of expression. Event organizers were trying to build bridges so that students might see that people of different ethnicities are not that different from each other and that they can learn from one another.
I'm very excited. I can't stop moving. I'm trying so hard to just stay still. I love poetry slams. It's very, very fun.
They're nervous, they're excited, they're scared, so there's a lot of energy going on. I am Frank Centwali, Compass teaching artist. So this is the first annual Youth Springs Hope Poetry Slam, sponsored and put on by Rochester STEM Academy and the Rochester Civic Theater. And the idea is bringing youth together through spoken word poetry to bring communities together here in Rochester.
Sky cry. Why me? A question everyone tends to ask. Yes, I am just like you, a human being. It seems you think I walk around with a bully me mask. My poem that I'm doing alone is actually a bullying poem. It's a personal poem, it's a true story. I actually was bullied through elementary school and middle school, so I'm kind of giving them a piece of what made me, me. This generation is such a disgrace. You pick on little things such as race. You pick on broken people. But you really don't realize until guilt kisses you on the cheek and you see you're the reason that person dies. They can't see it, they don't even try. But I can feel it every blink of an eye when the clouds go gray and the sky begins to cry. Sky cry. My aunt that just recently passed, she told me how to let out my inner emotions that I can't explain out on paper. So pretty much poetry started back from when I was 10, I should say. It's when I started writing. And pretty much it's it can be an anger relief, or it can be my weeping way to get everything out.
Picture this. Society, a thrift store. Every person in the clothing with tags and labels, making others worth more and more worth less. Everybody has their label, but you chose to put yours onto yourself. I am Tierra Felder, and I do poetry now with the Boys and Girls Club on the Uprising Voices team. So the poem I'm performing, it does not currently have a name, I'm still trying to think of one, is about this girl that I've known for years at my elementary school who basically changed. She kind of changed her way into being the stereotype for women, and I had to watch from aside her just being that way, and how a lot of other girls at my school choose to do that too, for nothing else but for the other gender and for themselves. You're allowing them to take over your mind. They don't care. They're playing with your emotions like puppets on a string. When had you become the stereotype of women? Do I choose to repeat what they say, or does it make me one of them? Maybe they're right. I apologize. I just miss you. I miss the you that nobody else sees anymore. Where did you go? That is all.
The youth are the future, and we need to make sure that they are collaborating in community. Regardless of what the past looks like, the focus is on making sure that the Muslim youth, the Catholic youth, the atheist youth, the Lutheran youth, all the youth have a voice, and find their commonalities. And that's what the poetry does. When they write their poetry, all of a sudden, that stuff doesn't matter. It's the common human experience that as adults we forget, and it separates us. Well, the young people are finding their common human experiences through their literature and through their poetry and through their performance. And to me, that's what it's all about.
In the spirit of the shepherds, spinners, and weavers of old, Faribault Woolen Mill is keeping craftsmanship alive as they create beautiful blankets from wool. The mill recently celebrated its 150th anniversary. The company that began as a small mill on the bank of the Cannon River now exports around the world, still using the same careful techniques from fiber to finished product.
Well, the first time I came down to visit the mill was in March 8th of 2011. And I recall the day I came down, it was a cold day, and I was told that in the fall of 2010 there had been a flood on the river here, a 500-year flood, and it had left about 10 feet of water in the lower level. You know, we go down into this very dirty, messy, smelly basement, and that's my introduction. When you think of Carl Clemmer starting a business in 1865 at the end of the Civil War, Lincoln was president, and he starts with a one-horse treadmill-powered carding machine that he carded wool for batting from local farmers for quilts. It's such a interesting story, just thinking of the time of that, and then so end of the Civil War, through world wars, through the Great Depression, through many economic cycles, that the Clemmers and the Johnsons and the employees that passed through here really made this what it is.
This company was founded by the Clemmers, and they lived in this area, and it was passed down for generations, and the Johnsons were in it, and they were passed down for generations. My name is Mary Boudreau. I've been working here at the Faribault Woolen Mill for 60 years. I've been in the weave shop all the time. Right now, I'm just here working and trying to train people and whatever needs to be done. Things have changed in the years I have been here. Mainly machinery and adding on to the building, making more room and more machines and faster. And different blankets, different patterns we're making, and it all changes, something new designs.
I remember very early on, because we hadn't seen a machine turn on here, so one of the things when we bought it, we didn't even know if anything actually worked, and we certainly didn't know how to make it work, but as things would turn on, if we were up in this side of the building, we'd get a phone call on our cell phone that said, hey, a carding machine is turned on. You know, the spinning frames are on, a loom is running. And you go back down, and this place that was quiet, dark, cold, all of a sudden was coming back to life. And you could really feel it come back to life.
And so to see the mill come back to life after it was closed for a couple of years is not only a sense of pride, but it's almost a sense of obligation to continue it on its journey. I'm Terry Mockentune. I'm the CEO here at Faribault Woolen Mill. I think a lot of what we talk about here at the mill is that this has been on a journey for over 150 years. That there is no final destination for a company that has been passed from generation to generation and from different workforce to different workforce. To a community, they have participated in that journey for over 150 years.
This mill is one of the last fully integrated mills in the United States, meaning we start with the bale of wool. So we start with the fiber, and everything every process is applied under the roof of this building, so there's nothing outsourced. So we start with the raw fiber. It's dyed. If it needs to be dyed, it will be dyed. It will be then carded and turned into yarn, and then woven, and then we'll go through a wet processing process, drying, napped, cut, sewn, finished, and packaged and labeled, and so literally the whole thing happens right here. So this is a unique place in that everything happens here. There's 22 processes that are applied.
A lot of the equipment here at the mill, while it might be old, is also how it's still done. A lot of the other woolen mills, like a Pendleton or a Woolridge, use similar equipment as ours. The skilled workforce today that runs a lot of this these are guys and gals that either grew up on farms or like being around the auto industry. They're people that are very good with their hands. They like to mechanically think about how things can be taken apart and put back together, a real kind of mechanical engineering background.
You know, it's really a great feeling to work here, and now that we celebrated our 150th year, we're a big asset to the community with the people we employ, and our product is sold all over. We have a great variety of stuff going all over. Nice new patterns, and it's really good. So it's just kind of special to see something out in the market that you help make. A lot of people have had blankets for a long, long time, and I know I have one at home that my mother and dad got for their 50th wedding anniversary. And I forgot what year that was, but I was still in high school at that time, so. But I still have it, and it's just like new yet.
Some of the stories that I resonate the most with here are stories that relates to people getting their issued World War I or II green standard issue blanket and carrying those with them into the European theater or even the Pacific theater on that war front. And for me, that really brings alive what we do here when you can look back at pictures and stories and think about how this business has had a relationship with our United States Armed Forces for all these years, and has really played a role in this, the successful proliferation of democracy, I guess if you want to say that, and freedom throughout this world. And I think that is what we need to continue to breathe into our product here as we expand and grow as a company.
How would you describe the shape of Minnesota? How did Minnesota get its distinctive appearance? We talked to historian Dr. William Lass, who wrote a book on the subject called Shaping the North Star State, A History of Minnesota's Boundaries. He gave us some insights on how the state of Minnesota was formed.
Most state boundaries are a combination of natural and artificial. So if someone would walk from Iowa into Minnesota, they can't look down at the ground and say, I see 4330 on the ground. Some surveyor went out and determined this is where 4330 is. I'm Dr. William E. Lass, a historian and author. The last book I wrote is titled Shaping the North Star State, A History of Minnesota's Boundaries. There is a widespread urban myth in Minnesota that the northwest angle resulted from the surveyors there. Well, not only is this wrong, but it's a lazy way of looking at history. You look at it casually and say, I don't understand it, and therefore somebody made a mistake. Well, your obligation is to understand it. It's not to shrug it off. Minnesota's northern boundary resulted by treaties between the United States and Great Britain. That part of Minnesota that's on the Canadian side of Lake of the Woods is always called the Northwest Angle. So at the end of the Revolutionary War, the United States and Great Britain, by a Treaty of Paris, agreed to boundaries for the new country. They relied on a map that was almost 30 years old. There seemed to be a natural boundary on the north formed by the Great Lakes, and Lake of the Woods appeared on the map as a source of the Great Lakes. So you follow what was supposed to be the Great Lakes watershed as far as the northwest point of Lake of the Woods. The gap was not closed finally until 1818, when the United States and Great Britain agreed to use the 49th parallel from Lake of the Woods to the Continental Divide in the Rocky Mountains. So in that same treaty, they specified that we will agree to draw a due north-south line until it intersects the 49th parallel. If you go from the northwest point of Lake of the Woods to the 49th parallel, you do leave this odd little chimney on the Canadian side of Lake of the Woods. Iowa started seriously agitating for statehood in 1844. Generally speaking, what they wanted was a Mississippi River boundary as far north as possible. And so when Iowa held its first constitutional convention, there were proposals to run the boundary from the mouth of the Big Sioux northeastward to what is present-day Sauk Rapids, Minnesota. So in other words, under that proposal, anything to the east and south of that line, which would have included the Twin Cities, that all would have been part of Iowa. And what emerged in Iowa was the thinking that the most important thing to Iowans was to have access to two great navigable rivers, the Mississippi on the east and the Missouri on the west. And the Congress of the United States countered and said, all right, if we accept the western boundary as the Missouri River, then you have to agree to put some sort of limitation on the north, which is where 4330 comes from. Wisconsin was admitted to statehood in 1848. At the time it applied for statehood in December of 1846. The suggested boundaries were exactly where they're at today. The voters of Wisconsin had to vote on the Constitution, and they rejected the Constitution, not because of the boundary, but because the Constitution had such provisions as women could inherit property, which to conservatives was too liberal, so they rejected it. The Second Convention was dominated by Wisconsin expansionists. So in the Second Constitutional Convention in 1848, these expansionists said, look, among other things, we want the Falls of St. Anthony. So their proposal for a boundary was that Wisconsin's northwestern boundaries start at the mouth of the Rum River. This is present-day Anoka. And then shoot a line from Anoka to the St. Louis River. Minnesotans, to say the least, had a conniption fit. So, among other things, they organized a petition drive. The Congress of the United States said the best thing to do is to limit Wisconsin to the original proposal. Let's go back to what was proposed in 1846. So after thousands of words and much debate, you come full circle and you're back to the boundaries as they exist today. When the House of Representatives was considering Minnesota's boundaries, the House Committee on Territories made a change so that the boundary didn't follow the Big Sioux. It followed from the southern end of Big Stone to Iowa, in other words, where it is at today. The change in Congress was made in a committee. There is no written explanation of it. Lobbyists, of course, tend not to leave very visible tracks. This is why they're lobbyists. So these people recognize that Minnesota has a capital. Minnesota has a penitentiary. Minnesota has a university. So if you look to the west of Minnesota, you want to restrict Minnesota in some way. And if you restrict the boundary, then this opens up the potential for establishing a future important city, say at the falls of the Big Sioux River. Now, who today would care to argue that they were wrong? People historically are very deficient about explaining why they do things. They'll leave a record of what they do. They're not near as good about leaving records of why they do it. In a way, you would barely brush the surface. My book is documented. Serious students of history can go to the footnotes, and they can go back to the original sources. They should do this routinely. I've done it myself, and I think it would be quite instructive for individuals to do that.
There aren't many hats that Lynette Yencho doesn't wear as an artist. She draws, she paints, she sculpts, she designs websites, she designs costumes. Her creativity is fueled by her love of the irreverent and her cherished dogs. We visited her in her home in Owatonna, which is filled with her creations.
I remember very distinctly when I was in second grade, my second grade teacher had us tell stories, and I automatically started illustrating this, made a little cartoon strip. And I could see my teacher reading it and laughing and smiling, and it just made me feel so exhilarated that she was excited about my work. My name is Lynette Yencho. I live in Owatonna, Minnesota, and I'm a painter, a sculptor, an illustrator, a commercial artist, a graphic designer, costume designer, set designer, and anything else that you might want me to be, I can try and be. I started illustrating because it was easy to, that was something that took just a pen and a paper or a pencil, and I could just draw things. I like to put people and things in ridiculous positions and, make a visual satire, in pen and ink. One of my favorite subjects is dogs, of course. I just love happy faces. Frankie is my latest dog accomplishment, and she's my little girl. I've got to do a few paintings for the Healing Arts show, and I thought I would also paint her as the girl with the pearl earring. My art's always been very personal to me. Sometimes they mean something to me that, that probably it isn't going to mean anything to anyone else, but ends up sometimes they do too, so that's okay. Since I do so many different types of mediums, one might want to think if it's difficult to move from one medium to the next. I can get stuck in a situation on a painting and not know where to go from there. And if I just leave it and go do something else, go write some letters or read some mail or look for jobs, I can go back to it and I'll oftentimes have an answer. Then you find your answers so much easier when your mind is quiet. My art has always been a part of me, so I don't even understand myself why I'm an artist. You know, it's just, you just are. Designs, logo designs, computer art and package design. Come on, Photoshop. So many of the most successful people in the world will say, oh, who's the guy from Hewlett-Packard that said, you know, the way to success is to step up your failure rate. You know, the more times you fail, you will eventually succeed. Something that's really gonna impress. And so when it comes to painting, I think anybody that wants to paint, that really likes to get in there, and that the sensuousness of watercolor paper, and just feel it and imagine it and get into it, and so what if nothing good comes out of it? Throw it out. Try something else. Have a good time at it. There's so many things to do. There's plenty of room for anybody's art in this world.